Shabbat Shalom. I hope you have a good day and had good days yesterday and the day before, because it was Purim, and today is Shushan Purim, Shushan Purim, meaning in the walled cities, meaning Jerusalem. It's a great way of being reminded of the threat that has surrounded Israel at times, and how Israel was victorious, but at the cost of many lives, as this Purim story is recounting. So that's what it is. It is what it is. Today we're going to talk about this text and a special order. The command is given, Tetzaveh. We'll talk about that word in particular also at the end. We'll talk about certain things that have to do with being leprous, being priest, a holy altar, and what all these things have to do with us now, and they have a lot to do with us. So let's begin with the text. Today we start with the text in the Torah, Exodus 29 verse 19 through 22, from a bigger context which we won't read. You shall take the other ram, and Aaron and his sons shall lay their hands upon the head of the ram. Then you shall kill the ram, and take some of its blood, and put it on the tip of the right ear of Aaron, and on the tip of the right ear of his sons, and on the thumb of their right hand, and on the big toe of their right foot, and sprinkle the blood around on the altar. You shall take of that blood that is on the altar, and of the anointing oil, and sprinkle it on Aaron and on his garments, and on his sons and on their garments, the garments of his sons with him. And he shall be made holy, and his garments, and his sons' garments with him. Also you shall take some of the ram's fat, don't say it wrong, the fat tail, the fat that covers the innards, the cover of the liver, the two kidneys, the fat that is on them, and the right thigh, for it is a ram of consecration, of making perfection. So we're talking about these things, and we start with this building up this desert sanctuary, which is getting more and more its shape. And in the beginning of the reading text of today, which starts at Exodus chapter 27 verse 20, there is a small section on producing olive oil. And special because there is a special recipe in how it's to be done. And the pressing of the oil was in such a way that you could only press very softly on each olive separately until one drip of blood, one little bit of oil came out of the olive, only one, and then that was it, nothing more, because then there could be coming oil out of the olive that was more contaminated or mixed with fibers and stuff like that. So the rest of the olives was crushed in order to use them for the special sacrifices, meal sacrifices. Now the candlestick, the menorah, needed to be lit continually. That means that the lights of it were burning only beginning from the evening until the morning, except the light on the west side of the candlestick that needed to be continue to give light day and night, according to one of the rabbis, Nachmanides, who has this idea from two other rabbis. Reading this, you should ask the question: what is this for? What is this message telling me? How am I in the picture? That's a very legitimate question to ask. And the answer is, compare yourself with this olive. The Bible is comparing Israel and those who connect with Israel in faith and in Bible and in the God of Israel. The Bible is comparing all these people with an olive tree. Israel together with the believers from the people, from the nations that are grafted on it. In order to produce holy oil, there needs to be, but then in a spiritual way, people who produce their spiritual oil, on which the light of God will give light. In order to produce that oil between parentheses, we need to undergo a light pressure, a very light persecution in comparison with the glory that we will have in the world to come. And so having difficulties in your life, to say it in a simple way, could produce a blessing instead of being a nasty thing. Becoming a priest in Judaism is similar in a certain way with the cleansing of someone who is leprous, who is suffering from leprosy. Tzaraat in Hebrew, which is a cleansing of the leper with the blood on the ear, the right thumb, and the right toe of the foot, the right foot. What is the reason of that? The reason is that somebody who is a believer, or somebody who believes, somebody who trusts in God, who trusts in an entity outside you, above you, the Creator, especially someone who wants to act in a priestly way, needs to become aware of a spiritual laziness, because leprosy is the sickness of being lazy in your soul. Your faith has slided away and is on a slippery slope. And it is not easy to become aware of it and be able to observe that, but that's what we should do. We should look inside and say, am I still that enthusiastic person that I was in the beginning when I got to learn God, get to know God, get to meet God? We need to develop the desire to be confronted with the dark side inside of us, the darkness inside of us. So somebody who is a believer, who says he is trusting God, needs to get the awareness of this laziness and needs to put it off. Take it off of yourself. A few weeks ago, I was talking about the law, the Torah, which you can compare with being vaccinated, like in Corona time. And I'm not saying that I'm for or against vaccination. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but that's not the point. What I'm saying is that the Torah can be compared with receiving a vaccination. And if you're against vaccination, forgive me for the comparison, but what I'm saying is that I said this, and I'm saying this because of the picture in the Bible that says that no one is perfect. We know this, but it shouldn't be an excuse to become perfect, or to say I don't have to be perfect because no one is. It's like in Matthew 9 verse 12, where Yeshua, Messiah of Israel, says, who is healthy doesn't need a physician, but those who are sick need it. Everybody knows that, but that's not what he said. What he said was, somebody who thinks he's healthy, he thinks he doesn't need a physician. But somebody who's realizing that he is sick should go to a physician. And he says this because we need to realize that we are not perfect, and God is asking our perfection, which we cannot reach, but we should go for it, try it, fight for it, live for it. And therefore Torah becomes some kind of a vaccination for the sick people, as in the words of Yeshua, and it was some kind of a contemporary comparison. In the Bible, leprosy is described as something where some people show this in their skin and in their hair, in their clothes, in the walls of their homes, and that's where cleansing needs to be done. But with a priest, this is done with the ear and the thumb and the toe as a way of preventing or being aware of. Or making sure you don't get into the situation of being this lazy person. We have a tendency in ourselves to think it's okay. I don't have to do my thing. I can do my own thing, and I don't have to worry about. I'll decide for myself how much time and effort I want to spend in becoming a better person. Yet the Bible is saying we are not doing enough. This tendency to not leaving our comfort zone is inside many, or if not all of us. Not daring to take any risk. Also in risk in meeting people and working out differences and stuff like that. Today the Bible is teaching us that we need to protect ourselves against this laziness within ourselves, because before you know it, we will be attacked by thoughts and tendencies within ourselves, waiting for anybody who is lazy and continues to be lazy, and then will be on this slippery slope downwards. This spiritual laziness is also contagious. With people, this is a spiritual infection that takes place. You could call it laziness. Which kind of laziness am I talking about? Which kind of? Yes. Well, there is, for instance, the laziness number one. It's on the screen. Not using your common sense anymore. Always use your common sense. There's something inside you that knows what to do and what not to do. And if you lost it, it's good to get in touch with it again. Not using your common sense is, for instance, reading on internet anything that flies by and that comes that meets your eye, and you believe it without checking who wrote it and what were the intentions of those who wrote it and stuff like that. That's one. The second one is not spending enough time with God anymore. Which means, with that I mean time to listen. That's spending time with God and with other people as well. Time to listen, not speak, listen. And I'm not talking about with practice prayers when I talk about this. I'm talking about time to listen, and then time to speak in order to bring your despair and your anxieties to God in an honest way, not speaking time in which you alone are the speaker. That's number two. No, there's a number three, and that is that there is laziness in servitude, in serving. Are we the person that is quick to serve, or are we more quick in being served? Number four, laziness in showing honest respect to other people and to God as well, perhaps in the first place. Instead of just saying that you show respect, that's something else. Those are not the same things, I mean. Number five, laziness to give the same forgiveness to others that you would like to receive yourself. And number six is the laziness to allow yourself to having more anger and outrage than you allow other people to have. Another example, laziness to destruct your congregation, if it would take that in order to win your righteous battle. And number eight, laziness in not being critical to yourself anymore. and honest toward yourself anymore. 8 examples, there are many more that you can find yourself, that this laziness is expressing itself in and through. Read this text in the Bible of this whole chapter, the chapters that are given for this week, the chapters in Exodus 27 verse 20 through 30 verse 10, and you see a beautiful picture that is developing and coming to life before your eyes. One of the things that you see that present itself is the high priest of Israel, who is carrying the breast shield on which the stones, 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, on his heart, in a way that there will always be not only judgment and only cool thinking, but also love and care that are accompanying the arguments to judge a person. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, will pray and cares for you and wants you to be restored within yourself, not just judge or something like that. Beautiful pictures in the description of this week, of all these details of the desert sanctuary. Priests, the high priest, both groups were wearing 4 pieces of clothing that were the same. The high priest had a set of 4 pieces of dress that were different, but these 4 white clothes were the under clothes, white linen, the tunic, white linen, and embroidered for the high priest. So there was a little difference there. A band, a sash with linen, with blue and purple and scarlet red, embroidered for the high priest, and a head covering which was a little bigger and a little different with the high priest than for the priests, which served in a picture that there is a high amount of serving that was required, whether you are priest or high priest. Serving is the same. In serving, you're the same. Beautiful picture. You can compare this. We cannot compare ourselves with the priest, not with the high priest, because he is unique. There's only one of him at the time, and specifically for the high priest were 4 extra dress parts. That was the cloak, the me'il. It was blue, and on the lower part of it, it was decorated with small bells and pomegranate tassels. And the bells were a warning sign for the priests who were watching at the moment that the high priest was entering the Holy of Holies with a rope around his middle, his belly, so that when he would die, because he said or thought the wrong words, they could pull them out if they didn't hear the bells anymore. By the way, this reminds me of saying and warning, if you ever think of a spiritual exercise in which you walk through the temple, be sure that you don't go into the Holy of Holies yourself. Don't do it. Don't go into it on your own. Always be carried by the high priest, because that's how it goes, and that's how it went. The high priest carried all of Israel, carrying us on his breast by this breast shield. That's the first extra dress that the high priest was wearing. Then there is also the vest, an ephod, a piece that showed also the an apron you could compare it with, which is some kind of sign of serving also as the high priest, not equal with the priests, but also as high priest, where he was, and this was made, woven with, among other fabrics, gold, which shows that serving for the high priest was the low position of serving, was an example expressed by the gold, made into something high. Then there is also the piece of the breast shield itself, the Shushan, with the 12 gems, with the names of the tribes of Israel, and also a place where the stones of decision were hiding, the Urim and Tumim. And then there was the golden diadem, the tzitz, a band on the head of the high priest with the inscription Kodesh la Adonai, holy for the Lord, only on the head of the high priest, because he was not only holy for himself but also for all of his people, and he was carrying the responsibility for all of us. The priests had to learn how to work with the altar, not only the burning and the cleaning, and not only the slaughtering and the way of working with the sacrifices, the animals, but also with the almost magical, I'm saying almost, magical working of the altar. And this is prescribed, this is described in Exodus chapter 29, verse 37, where it says, and I'm reading, the 7 days you shall make atonement for the altar and sanctify it, and the altar shall be most holy. Whatever touches the altar and whomever touches the altar shall be holy. So there is a special way of working by this altar. When it's working, it does a most incredible thing. You touch it, you're holy, only by the touch. The touch alone does it. This is possible because of the reconciliation that takes place by the blood of animals on this altar, which is a sign, a confrontation, a very painful confrontation of our own, the human cruelty that causes these sacrifices to take place in order for us to see how cruel we are, and be thankful that it's a sign of grace that you don't have to die yourself, and you can take an animal. Don't say you're against the sacrifices. If you're eating meat, you're more consequent if you don't eat meat, and then say I'm against eating blood, and I'm against eating animal meat, so I'm also against the sacrifices. It's good to be against it, because in a sense we should be. That makes it even more clear how confrontational it is to see the cruelty of human beings in killing that animal as a picture of the cruelty that is inside us. Yeshua himself also talks about the holiness of the altar, and not of the animals, but of the altar itself that had this holiness. You find it in Matthew 23, verse 19. It says, "You blind fools," which is a way of talking in the Middle East. Not saying, well, dear people, no, you blind fools. Which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? And he was talking about it that way because people are more focusing on particular rituals, more on the gift for the altar than on the altar itself. And this is a general mistake we make, that we look more and watch more and focus more on the details of something than on the upbuilding of holiness that the Bible is showing. And this is how we don't understand what the spiritual quality and the spiritual construction is of all this that we're talking about right now. So in a way, Yeshua is showing a construction of holiness. There's the temple which contains the gold. If you swear by the gold, like like Moses was taking the sun and the moon and the planet as witnesses for what he was saying at a certain moment, you could take the gold and take that as the witness for what you were saying. Then Yeshua is saying in this piece, you can read it again in Exodus 23. Yeshua is explaining that it's not the gold that is so important, it's the temple that contains the gold that is more holy. If you're focusing on the gifts of the altar, realize that the altar is higher, and there's a meaning behind that. If you focus on the temple and you think that is, the temple, if the temple was there again, realize that you should focus more on him who lives in the temple, he is saying in the same piece of text. And if you if you are looking forward to heaven, look forward to the throne and him who is sitting on the throne. There is always more in this climbing, developing picture. It is interesting that he says these words in Matthew 23, by the way, followed by chapter 24, in which Yeshua is talking about horrible things that are still to take place for Israel. And so he's warning, and he says, make sure that you see the holiness starting on earth with gold and gifts on the altar, but ending with the throne and God sitting on it, because this you need to see and keep in mind when the horrible things around you are multiplying and life is getting more and more difficult, which it was for Israel at the time and still is at times. Have an eye for the higher holiness. It's not all the same. You see the altar, you should be aware of the sacrifice that makes things possible that are not possible without the sacrifices. And the sacrifices are there for us to realize what it takes for God to be able to forgive us. God who brings forgiveness if the priest brings the sacrifice, if Messiah is dying and being raised from the dead in order to make forgiveness possible. If we believe in that picture, which only means believing in that picture, only means that we realize that cruelty in the acts that are taking place in the sacrifices are a mirror of our own cruelty that needs to be done away with, to other people, toward ourselves. Realize that touching the altar of the temple is not the same as being in the neighborhood and close by Messiah, your hand on the throne in order to plead with God, but it is in the same context of sacrifice, which is for, if we really understand what happens when that sacrifice takes place, a realization of how dependent we are on God, on his forgiveness, and on our own weakness and our mortality. His sacrifice, the sacrifice of Messiah, prescribed and predicted by prophets in the Bible, the prophet of Daniel, Isaiah, already in Genesis chapter 3. This sacrifice was necessary for the darkness within humankind. By touching that altar of sacrifice, altar between parentheses, you make yourself aware of your own darkness. It is important to see that. Undergo a certain oppression like the olive to produce the oil. That will bring holiness. Touching that altar will bring holiness. Let's go to the text in the Haftarah, the text in Ezekiel on the screen, and realize that when I'm talking about these things like this, we're talking about the mystery, the mythical not mythical, the mysterious, should I say, the mysterious way the Bible is using these pictures in order to convey a message and to let us know that words are not enough, are not able to express the message that needs to be expressed for us to come into touch with our own weaknesses. So instead of words, or besides words, also the images that all this is bringing. Ezekiel chapter 43 verse 10 through 12. Incredible words. Because Ezekiel is talking about the temple and the building of the third temple. But see what he says, how this temple is the confrontation with the weaknesses within people. Let me read the text to you, and it's on the screen so you can read with me. You son of man, and the term son of man there in chapter 43 verse 10 is the same term and the same title like this is used for Yeshua in the New Testament, the Son of Man. It's a special term for men of God like Yeshua, like Ezekiel, as prototypes, as examples of how a Son of Man, being a woman or a man, Ben Adam, perhaps Bat Adam in Hebrew, but should be. So let's continue. You son of man, you show the house to the house of Israel, that they may be ashamed of their iniquities. You see the connection of showing the house, the temple, and the connection with the iniquities of the people and being ashamed, not as a reproach, not as a condemnation, but as a you need to perceive this. You need to have this in your perception. Have an eye for your iniquities, be ashamed in order for you to grow. It is not to be punished, but to grow. Be ashamed of their iniquities and let them then measure the pattern. If they be ashamed of all that they have done, make known to them the form of the house and its fashion and its exits and its entrances and all its forms and all its ordinances and all its forms and all its laws, and write in it in their sight, that they may keep the whole form of it and all its ordinances and do them. You see that all this is done not as a construction, as an architect or as the builders of this temple only, yes, but not only, but also to get in touch with your own soul, with your weaknesses, with your sorrow, with your misery, bitterness, and then to receive healing and forgiveness, but also be aware of what you've done wrong. This is the law of the house. On the top of the mountain, the whole limit around it shall be most holy. Behold, this is the law of the house. So in the words of Ezekiel, we learn that the Jewish religion is not something just like you do as a hobby kind of a thing. There needs to be space and opportunity for being ashamed, for feeling very sorry for what you have done. We need to be in touch with our own mistakes, being open for having committed mistakes because of the darkness within ourselves, in all of us. Not as something to just do and that's it. No, it needs to be followed by gladness and being grateful that God forgives and then also forgives. But first there needs to be this making up of the bill in order for us to know what we're guilty of. That is the key of being forgiven, to know what you're guilty of. The focus is then on the gladness and the forgiveness afterwards that we receive, but we cannot be forgiven if we don't know what we're guilty of. So the measures of the desert sanctuary and the temple are not just interesting facts. They don't just produce an interesting building. They're meant to make us ashamed, which is a personal exercise in self-knowledge, in mindfulness, followed by enjoying the temple where God is living. There's an example in the Bible of someone who realized that Torah, the law, which is a poor translation for the word Torah, and temple have to do with being ashamed because of behavior, is the famous king of southern Israel with the name Yoshiyahu, King Josiah. He's the son and the grandson of two mafia kings reigning over southern Israel. And he is saving money for the restoration and the building again of the temple, which was so left alone and neglected. And this restoration takes place, and people find something very unique. I want to read this to you because it's so special. In 2 Kings, comes on the screen, chapter 22, verse 8 through 13, reading. King Hilkiah, the high priest, said to Shaphan, the scribe, I have found the book of the law, Torah, in the house of the Lord. Hilkiah delivered the book to Shaphan, and he read it. Shaphan the scribe came to the king and brought the king word again, and said, Your servants have emptied out the money that was found in the house, and have delivered it into the hand of the workmen, who have the oversight of the house of the Lord. Shaphan the scribe told the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest has delivered a book to me, dear king. And Shaphan read it before the king. It happened, when the king had heard the words of the book of the law, that he tore his clothes. The king commanded Hilkiah the priest and Ahikam and Asaiah, the king's servant. And he said, Go, inquire of the Lord for me, and for the people, and for all Judah, concerning the words of this book that is found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that is kindled against us, because our fathers have not listened to the words of this book, to do according to all that which is written concerning us. Now the only thing he heard was the Torah, and yet this was his response, being ashamed. This is the right kind of response a person has when he is coming into touch with this spiritual document which is called Torah, and which Paul in the New Testament calls a spiritual document. Someone who has no shame and no feelings of remorse because of her own mistakes, does not understand the message of Torah and temple. There is no forgiveness without being ashamed and being remorseful. That's the message. Let's go to the New Testament in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 through 32, and we continue our study into the symbolism, mysticism of all these things we find in this desert sanctuary that is being built up. Ephesians 4, verse 26, reading. It's on the screen. Be angry, but don't sin. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Neither give place to your darkness. Let him who stole steal no more. I think it's also let her who stole steal no more. That can be stealing of money, but it can also be stealing of someone's good name, reputation. But rather let him labor, working with his hands, the thing that is good, that he may have something to give to him who has need. Let no corrupt speech proceed out of your mouth, but such as is good for building up, as the need may be, that it may give grace to those who hear. Don't grieve the Spirit so holy of God, in whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, all wrath, all anger, outcry and slander be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other just as God also through Yeshua forgave you. In the New Testament, where all these practical examples are given of this laziness, as I called it today, and this negligence in which we can fall. Make sure that you go and find the right people around you that are also looking for a solution for the darkness they found in themselves, because there's some of that in all of us. Don't listen too much to people who are judging you in a wrong way. It's not so good. Or if you do it to yourself, say, this is enough. Try to cut away anger within your own soul that you cannot get rid of, because this anger is a sign of not trusting God, that He is taking care of something that took place by which you became angry. But also you are not able to free yourself. You're captive. You're in captivity in your own anger. Try to get away of it today. Ask God to heal you from this anger. Stop with stealing, not only money, but also someone's good name, someone's reputation, which you should help build up. Is there bitterness in your soul? It is a result of something that took place. How long ago? The act has taken place already. Your bitterness can make you a prisoner of your own thoughts that you cannot stop. Ask God to help you to throw the bitterness out. It's good to say it and to express these words, that you ask God to help you to stop being bitter and to start enjoying life. Yes, but start to cut out the words yes, but. Throw it out. You have not been friendly to someone lately. Try to make up and change. Let me read this last verse again, chapter 4, verse 32, on the screen again. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted. When was the last time you were tender-hearted? If you're not, some of these things are still lingering too much in your soul. Forgiving each other, just as God also through Yeshua forgave you. So watch out for a black hole in your soul, like there are black holes, as astronomers are teaching us. Black holes that are sucking up life and light and pleasure and stuff. Say to God, I want to take cover with you. I want you to cover me, and I want you to be my refuge. Fight for me, please. Be my revenge. I don't want to revenge myself anymore. Perhaps I'm lazy today. Help me to be unlazy. Perhaps I'm working too much for myself. The interesting thing, I was saying that also a little bit in the beginning, hinting at it, but now I'm saying it more clearly. The first word of the text of today in Hebrew is Tetzaveh, which has the word mitzvah also in it, which is something like a commandment. Tetzaveh means that you order. Moses was told by God to order to make this light. That's the first word of the text of this week. Interesting, because many times the text says, Moses, say to the people, speak to them and say, but today it is, give them the command. And there is a difference. And the difference is, this is forever. It's not a time limited. We have an eternal light in all the synagogues in the world. If they are closed because of Corona, it's perhaps different, but this is the situation, because it's an eternal commandment to have light in the synagogues as a remembrance, as a reminder of the light in the temple, and that was a reminder and remembrance of the time of the light in the desert sanctuary, and that was a remembrance of the time of the light on Mount Sinai. If we have this light, day and night, we have fulfilled this commandment in the text of today because of this word Tetzaveh. You say, but the temple has been destroyed. Yes, but the commandment is all the same because it's timeless, not limited by time, and it's something of heaven where there's no limitation of time. And the deeper meaning of it is make sure that you will be anointed with the oil of God's kingdom. Also, the deeper meaning, make sure that you embrace the light oppression in your life, also not from yourself, but also from people that did things to you, even with the feelings of anger and of bitterness, because by working anger and bitterness, by working out those two nasty things in your life, you come closer to God and you're freeing yourself from the prison you have put yourself into. Oil is the fuel of light. Torah gives light. Light is sound mind, wisdom. The temple is a picture of our body, but then the new person. And oil is something that we need to make, and we need to take care of it. There are parables in the New Testament regarding oil that should be there all the time. So we need to be busy with this oil, which is not a nice thing to think of, because there's something that goes before the oil, the production of oil, and that is the light pressure on us, so that we produce this oil out of our innermost being. Light is for ourselves. Light is meant for other people, not for the eternal one, because he doesn't need the light. He made it. It's his product, so he doesn't need it. He called it, when he created the earth, for us. It's the light of the world that he not created, but he called it. He said, "Let there be light." Yehi or in Hebrew. Let there be light. We need the light. We need each other's wisdom. We need each other's advice. Don't push it on someone else, but we need it. We need each other's sound mind and common sense. We need each other's comfort, our sense of humor. Light gives a sense of direction. All this has to do with the building up of this desert sanctuary. It made a great impression on the soul of Israel, which was necessary for the time that the temple of the desert wouldn't be there anymore. There would be this building, and after the destruction of the temple, we still have the impression of this desert sanctuary and the measurements. Ezekiel talks about it, and he says, make sure that when you see temple and when you read Bible, you feel the remorse and you feel sorry for and shame because of the things, the darkness that is still in you. You need so much light of God within yourself in order to free yourself from being imprisoned and things like this. When Moses gave a part of his spirit to the 70 elders who were with him, it was not the light, it was a part of God's sense of direction. It was his love, his healing, his deliverance. In a document called, in a rabbinical document called Parshat Tetzaveh, you find the words which you will see on the screen, an interesting piece of text, which I read to you gladly. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, in this world you need the light of the temple. Other lights were lit by it, but in the coming world I will, regarding this lamp, bring King Messiah for you. He who is being compared with a lamp. Because there is written in Psalm 132 verse 17, there I will make the horn of David to bud. I have ordained a lamp for my anointed. And this is also because what Yeshua says in John chapter 8 verse 12, the words again, therefore Yeshua said to them, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. God is living in a cloud of life, unpenetrable, and we receive this light. It's different from the sun, different from the moon and the stars. In the book of Revelation it talks about that. We don't need the sun anymore because the light of God will directly reach us directly. And the light that we need in order to live by, the light that we will always need, also in the world to come, will be there. The light will be there to answer the needs of Israel and for those who embrace the Messiah of Israel. The building of the ark in this desert sanctuary has been temporary, has a temporary character. You read this in Jeremiah 3 verse 16 and 17. Important text, because that shows that the literal ark is not there anymore because it's inside us. The law of God is in our hearts, as the Bible says, by the same Jeremiah in chapter 31. I read in this text, Jeremiah 3 verse 16 and 17. It shall come to pass, when you are multiplied and increased in the land in those days, says the Lord, they shall say no more the ark of the covenant of the Lord, neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they miss it, neither shall it be made any more. At that time they shall call Jerusalem the throne of the Lord, and all the nations shall be gathered to it. This is the end of times. To the name of the Lord Adonai, to Jerusalem. Neither shall they walk any more after the stubbornness of their evil heart. So there will be a new time, Jeremiah says. And don't say that the ark was then not necessary. More than the ark is there. The Torah is being written in our hearts. It's confirmed by their presence in our hearts, made visible more than ever before. That is a temporary thing, this ark. The light is an eternal thing. That's why it's called the Ner Tamid in the synagogues, the eternal light, because it's an eternal commandment that was given in the text of today. A light that is there also without the temple, without the ark, without the altar. Isaiah talks about it in chapter 60 verse 3. I want to read that to you too. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. And it's not the light necessarily of a light that is hanging somewhere, but it's the light also in people themselves, when Israel is that nation of priests, as it was called in Exodus chapter 19. Yeshua talks about it as well in Matthew 5 verse 14, also on the screen. You are the light of the world. A city located on a hill cannot be hidden. So there's a commandment given in the Hebrew text of today in the Torah, but also given in the New Testament. It's a universal, a timeless commandment coming out of the commandment that we read about today. Even if there's no lamp in the temple anymore, there's still this need to be light. The commandment of the literal light in the temple cannot be executed. What we do is being a light in our congregations, and we develop ourselves to become, if we are not that yet, light. In spite of, or perhaps also because of, the fact that we experience oppression, and which is not nice, but it has to do with the fact that this is how olives produce this costly, precious oil. So, going back to where we started in the beginning, what is the similarity between this leprous person, this lazy, in brackets, person, and the priest? Both are depending on God's love. They need God's love. They cannot live without God's love. They cannot live without the forgiveness and the undergirding of the Messiah of Israel by the name of Yeshua. And all multiple descriptions, all this whole totality of details, of descriptions of how to work on this temple is a way of working on ourselves. Translate the pictures into how you yourself, how I myself am built up by perfect measurements that God has given in a spiritual way and that He's described here. To do two things: to become the person of God God wants us to be, but also to become aware of where there is still darkness inside us, and to become ashamed and having remorse. And after that, we find the gladness and the gratefulness to God that He loves us and wants to restore us to full life. And with that I say, have a good week. Shabbat Shalom still, and then enjoy the next week that we look forward to. Thanks for now. Bye.